Our next speaker is Daniel Collins, who's the CDO of THROUGHTEK. He's going to be talking about building an IoT platform as a service from the ground up. So Daniel, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So it's a pleasure to be speaking here today, so thank you very much for that. I'll just, here we go. So as Matt mentioned, I'm Chief Data Officer at THROUGHTEK, which is a Taiwanese company. And I think we're slightly different from some of the other companies you've heard from today. We're certainly a lot smaller. And I'm going to try and give a slightly more lower level view of what we're doing in THROUGHTEK. So if we look at an outline of the talk today, I'm going to spend roughly 15 to 20 minutes. I'll start with a very brief sort of overview, a company introduction, because most people haven't heard of us. And then I'll start looking at our Calais platform. So this is our Internet of Things platform as a service offering. And this will start with look at the device support that we have, then moving on to the architecture of the platform, and then kind of moving on to our work with the All-Seen Alliance. And if you're not familiar with them, they're really looking at having a protocol called AllJoin to look at device interconnectivity. And this really showcases the flexibility of our platform and how we don't mandate any particular connection protocol. And then at the end, I will kind of mention why THROUGHTEK. I'm hoping the slides before will give a little indication towards that, but I really do ask you to come and speak to me after if you have any questions. So we're a relatively small company, established in 2008. Potentially we're a little bit older, too old to be called a startup still, but we have around 150 or just over employees at the moment. And our offices, or headquarters at least, are based in Taipei, which is where I work. And we have several offices around Asia, so a few in China, so in Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. And then another office in Yilan, which is part of Taiwan as well on the East Coast. So I think in this type of talk, it's useful to frame it with some operating statistics. And I mention that because I think it's quite easy to talk about IoT in a very theoretical viewpoint. We currently support about 5.5 million connected devices across the world. And these are spread around 160, I think, at the moment, countries. And a lot of our background is in IP cam manufacturer. So we started as a manufacturer and realized that our manufacturing was somewhat less successful or less able than our software side. So we kind of changed and started focusing on our strengths. The reason that you see 80 million here connections per month is mainly because of the lack of a one-to-one mapping relation between devices. So a lot of cameras or network-attached storage could have multiple concurrent connections at one time. So I think if you're going to take away one of these numbers, I'd really look at the connected devices at the moment. And a lot of these are manufactured in Asia, of course, which is where we're based. So I think that the start of the bulk of this talk, I wanted to look at what people typically want. I should stress at this point that we're a B2B business. We work with manufacturers and service providers in many ways, but we get very typical and similar questions coming from most of our customers. The first one, it's something like this: simple, flexible device connectivity. And the way that we define this actually depends where you're coming from. If you're an end user in a smart home, for example, you don't really want to adjust any network configurations or work with routers. You typically want the devices just to work. We address that through allowing QR code connections and barcode scanning of devices, so very little input is required. If you're a service operator or a manufacturer, you often want easy-to-use SDKs that can be incorporated into your product, maybe at the chip or SoC level, and you want it just to work straight away, ideally. So that's the kind of two areas people come from. The second one is this idea of centralized device management. And again, there's a parallel between the home consumer and the business. There's no reason these days why you should have to go to different URLs or different viewpoints to see all of your connected devices. We work with companies such as Lorex and Swan, certainly in the IP camera market. They have many devices out there. They need a consolidated and central way of managing these and seeing the data they have. And that typically comes in the form of dashboards and such like. I think the argument is very same in the home. You know, you want to know where your devices are. You want to group them by location. You want a single port to access them and look at the data from them. And then the final one is certainly a little bit more towards the enterprise or towards the business case. And this is the idea of an end-to-end solution. And I think this next slide does kind of a better job of explaining that. But I think it's also quite generic and sums up the idea of a platform as a service in general. This is a very typical but simplified workflow. We have a smart module, which is embodied in a smart object. But all of these central parts here, the network operator, service enablers, systems integrators, service providers, they're all quite typical, but they're very real pain points for manufacturers and providers to work through. And what we try to do with Calais as our platform as a service is to embody and take care of all of these steps. The idea behind this is really about lowering development costs, but also reducing the time to market if you can sort all of these out. And a lot of the time it means you're kind of consolidating points of contact to just a single one, and that's very useful when things go wrong and also stops you having to trawl through SLAs and legal contracts, small prints. So I thought before I start looking at Calais and actually giving you a feel for what the architecture's like, I wanted to explain where the word comes from. It actually is from the Aboriginal tribe, or one of the Aboriginal tribes in Taiwan, the Tao tribe, and it means handshake. And this serves kind of a dual purpose for us as a company. I mean, first of all, we're very, very proud of a Taiwanese origin, so that's one reason. The second one is a little bit of a nod to the handshaking protocol that you see in device connectivity terms. So a little play on words. But I've kind of highlighted at the bottom here, it's not really our slogan. I think it's slightly too generic to be that, but this is our aim. We want to connect as many devices as possible. I mentioned previously that the vast majority are IP cameras at the moment, of the 5.5 million, but we also support many others as well, and we're really striving to be flexible in how we connect. So I think it's useful to say that we want to connect all the devices. How do we go about doing this, and what are we doing at the moment? So first one, may be obvious for us in our location, is start from the silicon. If you look at Taiwan and South Korea, together we kind of encompass around 30 or 35% of all of the silicon manufacture in the world. So it certainly helps to be in this part of the world with companies like TSMC who are based there, very much rivals of Samsung. So we start with that, and we can actually look on this next slide. Again, I don't expect you to be reading these, but we support in excess of 100 system-on-a-chips, or SoCs. And to my knowledge, I think that's the most of any company in this area. And it's primarily due to our location and working closely with these companies. So we have a lot of experience with a lot of these different chipsets. Another point is we work directly quite often with manufacturers, and we can kind of see that from this sort of smart home schematic. We have experience in the security systems. We're working with Bosch and NXP, SoC as well. Also, smart plugs is a big area that we're branching out into, along with lighting, so NXP and Hue, and also storage, again, SoC mentioned, and Yodo. The IP camera I've highlighted again here because of our past, because of where we come from, and I consider that to be a real strength. I think earlier today we heard talks mentioning that it's very hard to find your area and to have subject matter experts working in this field to really add value. And I think we offer that, certainly in the video streaming and video surveillance as a service market. And the other point is this idea of connection and platform agnostic in nature. I think as a company, I mentioned we have 150 people, we're quite young. We can't really dictate or mandate what sort of connection protocol people are using. So we have to be flexible in this nature. And I think in this sort of slide, we look at what we're doing. So we have our Calais Cloud, which I'll go into the architecture of soon. But we support lots of different operating systems, Windows, iOS, Android. But these are coming from both sides of the spectrum, from the client side, so the mobile phone or tablet or computer you use to access device data, but also the device side. And that's kind of why I've isolated the RTOS in the bottom right. The device side, they're clearly low resource. You have to, designing for that and working with RTOS is very different and more challenging. You have to optimize your code. We support many versions of that because of our experience with many different devices and chipsets. So finally, this is the Calais architecture. I'm just going to talk you through it. I wanted to go through each level to a certain extent before showing this type of diagram. And it's relatively simplified. We see the bottom layer, which is the device layer that I talked about, so really starting from the silicon, the chips. And above that, we have this connection protocol area. So we work to support Z-Wave, rather Zigbee, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi for connection. But also we should have really the all-join connection protocol here, which is looking at trying to define a standard for interconnectivity between devices, certainly in the smart house. So once you have those two areas covered, you really move into the backbone of Calais. And this is really the modular nature comes to the fore. You have analytics capabilities, you have a push notification service, logic engine, video surveillance. And what we offer here is modular. So we can go to customers, or if we have camera manufacturers or people who work in retail, we can offer specific modules to them. They don't need to have the complete Calais platform. And the pricing models obviously kind of reflect that as well. So I think it's quite useful to be flexible in that nature. And I've kind of mentioned at the top there the enterprise and consumer. I don't want to spend too much time. I think we've had a lot of talks already which have been very high level and given these inspirational, aspirational viewpoints of how we can use this data. I think once you get the middle bit right, the backbone, the data collection, the stream processing, batch processing, the applications themselves are tweaks to that. If you make it truly scalable in the middle, you can do that. So I'm going to focus more on specific modules within Calais. I think I also want to point out here that we've kind of tethered third-party modules onto the left and right. I think as the size of company we are, we don't really expect to be able to offer everything to every company or every representative that comes to speak to us. So we have to have this ability to work with third-party and to pair with experts in their areas. And we're currently in talk with IBM for integrating advanced video analytics, but also, quite importantly, people like Trend Micro to look at security certification, which I think is really, really key to this area. So I think now, having looked just generally at the platform, I'm going to look at a few specific examples and look at the video surveillance as a service that we offer, or one of the services. So we can see in this sort of image, it's a screen grab of our Calais VSaaS offering. You see a kitchen scene there, basic functions such as turning cameras on and off. You can see the ability to create and control device groups, so whether it's based on geography or device function. But you also see the link to e-commerce there, which is the point I brought up there. You can select other cameras or purchase new smart devices for your home. And then also a basic sort of activity or event tagging for this type of work. So relatively basic functionality, but you should really get this right, because for a lot of people, the smart home really begins and ends with cameras. I genuinely believe that. For a lot of people, that's what they want to see, and this sort of seeing is believing, even if it's a cliche, is actually quite true, certainly at the moment. Now, this really means nothing without having something like a push notification or an IFTTT model, which was mentioned earlier, I think, by Sean. Just to walk you through this, it's a relatively simple implementation. You register your device, your phone, your tablet, and then you define a logic engine processor. When do you want to be notified? So in this case, in the bottom left, you can see glass break detectors. So it's clearly going down the intruder alert system. And this then registers with the TPNS, the THROUGHTEK push notification service, and then goes through push networks to your device. I think one of our strengths as a company is our location based in Asia. I have a lot of support and a lot of experience working in the Chinese market as well. So we've kind of mentioned Baidu in there as one of the main push networks, but we also extend beyond that to things like AliCloud as well. So this one is really looking at surveillance of the smart home. So generally, our core technology is peer-to-peer video streaming. That's what we started doing, as I mentioned, with the IP camera background. It's quite data and cost intensive, typically, if you don't do it via P2P. And I think reliable live streaming is also quite a challenge to get right. It's not easy to achieve. It's certainly not trivial. So this kind of brings us on to the demo that we did at MWC this year at Barcelona, which was pairing with the All-Seen Alliance to look at a very simple proof of principle application. So here, I won't spend too long on this, but you're welcome to come and speak to me, my colleagues, after. Is looking at integrating the all-join framework with our cloud solution. And in this sort of schematic, you can see the Raspberry Pi acting as a gateway agent. You can view this in the smart home terminologies like the gateway, the hub of the house. And you see an IP camera and then a smart TV. And the idea here is that from a scenario point of view, someone's at your door, you have a door cam, a camera there, they're ringing the bell, the notification comes through to your smart TV or your smartphone, and you can choose whether to stream data directly to those devices or ignore it. So it's really looking at a convenience function within the house, but it's a test case for using something like all-join and seeing how it integrates quite nicely with our cloud platform for the data analytics and video streaming. Doesn't seem to, okay, there you go. So yeah, please ask me if you have any specific questions about that later, but I don't want to dwell on it. So in the previous slide, you see that Raspberry Pi and another set-top box used. Really, the way we want to approach the smart homes in general is to use a set-top box as the gateway, the hub. A lot of people will look at peer-to-peer direct connection to devices. Of course, that's what we started with, and that's great for video streaming, but we certainly don't mandate that that's the way you should connect to a thermometer or an air conditioner unit. And it seems like a set-top box at the moment is kind of a very useful way, certainly for cable companies or telcos, to act as a gateway, act as the central hub for a certain element of data processing, but also to connect to cloud solutions. And this could also be combined and put into a smart TV eventually, but I think at the moment the set-top box has that extra computational power that is quite useful. So I think for the last kind of few minutes or so of the talk, I want to talk mainly about the smart home area and what we offer built on top of Calais. So we kind of have an idealized situation here. We have the Calais cloud and the gateway area connecting to all these devices. And we've built many or several different apps based on this to do with the camera alone, so camera streaming, but also personal cloud storage. Calais Home is a complete unit, but also Calais Care, which is some work we're doing in the healthcare area and wearables analysis. I'm going to focus on the Calais Home just for the next few bits, just to show you some UI for the project. So this is the type of Calais Home app. You can kind of see there that you have devices grouped on the right. That kind of links me back to my initial point about wanting to keep all your devices in the same place, having a consolidated view of them. And see that first here, you have the integration of multiple devices. You have a secondary step, which is grouping those devices by function or location. And then the third part is this idea of scheduling. So scheduling is a basic function, but it's very important. I think as people, we are creatures of habit, and that shows through this. So it's an essential part of the app. And we also have the addition of smart lighting. It's an area we're pursuing a lot in addition with work in the retail sector. I think this idea of connected devices is quite fruitful there, and I think a lot of small to medium businesses find it quite important to need to pair with a company that can enable them to do all of device connectivity and analytics for them. So I think going beyond the smart home is really aspiration. I mentioned this idea of connecting all the devices. And this is just a slide to kind of show that once you have that central backbone and you have video streaming, which is probably one of the trickier bits to get right in a lot of this connected world, it's not too much of a leap to move into the smart car area, for example, or outside of the smart home. I think it's really important to stress at this point, back to the flexibility of what we're trying to do, is that if people want to use peer-to-peer for whatever reason, so if it is video streaming or if manufacturers want direct connection to their devices, we can offer that, that's no problem. But we certainly don't force it, and we do embrace all other gateway connection protocols, and we're trying to support things like that. So we're trying to be flexible in what we do, but really mandating that we can help with the data collection and data analysis side and offering insight from that. So I think just a quick summary based on this. I think one main advantage is the speed to market, and that comes from working with chip manufacturers and working in the part of the world that we do and having the background. We have SDKs available, APIs and source code, and support over 100 SoCs. I think the second bit is the robust platform. I mentioned I didn't want to be theoretical in this. We have been supporting this sort of number of devices for quite some time, so we have experience, certainly across the world, in devices working with data centers in China as well as America and Europe. And then in addition to this, we have a cost-efficient or cost-effective solution. You know, the peer-to-peer part of it actually reduces server and bandwidth costs because you're not going via a relay route. That's quite important with our streaming technology. And all of this really lowers the customer support costs that people have. So I think that, along with the modular nature of the platform, make it reasonably compelling for people to engage with us and just to pick and choose what they want along with our third-party applications. So I think if you want to learn a little bit more about THROUGHTEK, you're very welcome to visit our website here and look at our SDK, which is on there as well. But I think that's, I'd like to leave it there if that's all right. So
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.